In class, we said, let's take our plates that we've been using and think of it as a circle with a radius of 1. In trigonometry, we call this the unit circle. And what ends up happening is we end up with coordinates. For example, if I have a circle with a radius of 1, I know to find the coordinate out here, I've counted 1 space over and 0 spaces up. So my coordinates are 1, 0. I can do that for the 4 quadrantal angles around the plate or around the unit circle. I could actually do this for all the special angles, but for now we're going to keep it to these quadrantal angles, the angles that make the quadrants. What turns out to be really interesting then is the x-coordinate is always going to be the cosine of the angle at that location, and the y value is going to be the sine of the angle at that location. And as we just discussed in the previous video, if you watched that, to find the tangent, that's simply the sine divided by the cosine. So it turns out that we can use these simple coordinates to evaluate the sine, cosine, and tangent for any angle, especially for these quadrantal angles, which we're going to do right now. So let's go ahead and take a look how to do this. Let's find the 6 trig functions for an angle of pi. Well, in this case, I need to know what units that's in, and because there's no degree symbol, that's going to be in radians. So I'll have to figure out on the unit circle where pi radians is. I could either convert that, or from memory or checking my plate, I can see that pi radians is really just 180 degrees. And so what I have at that coordinate is the point -1, 0. Well, recall that the x value will always be the cosine, it's in alphabetical order, and then the y value is always the sine. And so to start filling out the chart over here, I can see, without even touching my calculator, the sine of theta, and I guess I'll make a little note that theta is pi in this case. The sine of theta is just, not 1. The sine of theta is 0 because that was my y-coordinate. The cosine of theta is -1 because that's my x-coordinate. And then to find the tangent, that's simply the sine divided by the cosine. So 0 divided by -1 results in a tangent of 0. Okay? The reciprocals then are going to be found the same way we've always found them. Find a reciprocal. Just notice what happens this time. If I take 0, I can think of 0 as 0 over 1. When I find its reciprocal, that becomes 1 divided by 0. You're not ever allowed to divide by 0. You can't have a 0 in the bottom of the fraction. So we say that this is going to be undefined. The cosecant of pi radians doesn't exist. It's undefined. Okay? -1 is its own reciprocal. If I kind of do some scratch work, I guess down at, well, let's go up at the top a little bit. I can think of -1 as -1 over 1. If I flip that, it becomes 1 over -1, which is still just -1. So -1's its own reciprocal, so is 1. And then finally, to find the cotangent, that's the reciprocal of 0. Well, as we just discussed, the reciprocal of 0 doesn't exist, so it's undefined. When you're working with a quadrantal angle, you're only going to get 4 possible answers. It's either 1 or -1, or 0 or undefined. But we did this all without using our calculator, just taking a look at the unit circle.